Throughout history, some of the greatest wrestlers to ever step foot in a squared circle have worn masks. El Santo, Blue Demon, Tiger Mask, Jushin Liger, Rey Mysterio, Pentagon Jr., just to name a few. Additionally, there are a lot of great wrestlers who started out wearing masks but then began to work with their face exposed. Other times there'd be wrestlers who wore a mask once or twice for the sake of a storyline. Sometimes wearing the mask worked out fine. Other times, not so much. So this week, I'm giving you the biggest examples of great wrestlers' bad masks. Quick disclaimer, this video is about people who wrestled as totally different identities while wearing masks. So I'm not going to be talking about CM Punk when he got his head shaved, or Rosie when he was the superhero in training. Also, I won't be talking about people who wore masks as part of a deception. So no Mr. America, no Midnight Rider, no Calgary Kid, and so on. And finally, I won't be talking about the Machines, because fuck you, the Machines were awesome. Let's begin. Kane, one of my all-time favorites. Now don't get confused, Masked Kane from 1997 to 2003 was amazing. One of the coolest gimmicks in history as far as I'm concerned. These last few years when he can't make up his mind whether or not to wear it, well, that's a different story, but early Kane is best Kane. Before he tore off the cell door, a young Glenn Jacobs was wearing a mask down in USWA as Doomsday. The whole gimmick screamed demolition, but it was an intimidating look and appropriate for the more cartoony characters that have been a part of Memphis wrestling history. Now that I think about it, it was similar to Lord Humongous, another Memphis character that was played by more than a dozen wrestlers, including the future Psycho Sid. Boy, the Mad Max film series has to be one of the most influential in wrestling history. But back to my original point, I'm not talking about Doomsday. I'm talking about another mask gimmick that Jacobs had before that. A hollier, dare I say, jollier gimmick. Enter the Christmas Creature. Before he was Doomsday, the man who would be Kane donned this abomination of a costume, looking like the love child of Buddy the Elf, Mr. Mint, and Jason Voorhees. Jacobs apparently hated the gimmick, which shouldn't surprise anyone not from the North Pole. This holiday hurlfest of a gimmick didn't last very long, showing up a couple of times in late 1992 before Doomsday arrived in 93. And speaking of Kane, Luke Gallows. Oh man, folks, if you think Lukeski is suffering now on Raw, then you must have forgotten the month or so he spent back in 06 as Imposter Kane. Legend has it that this whole character came about when Glenn Jacobs was considering retirement, that Big Red 2.0 was going to be revealed as the real Kane all along. But as you all know now, Kane will never retire, so the plan was scrapped, leaving Gallows to sit there in his poofy Rhea Perlman wig like a big red turd. He actually beat Kane at Vengeance that summer, but the gimmick was killed off the next night. After a bit of a rough patch as Festus, Gallows wrestled as himself as part of the Straight Edge Society, went on to Japan, and the rest is history. I mentioned Jushin Liger at the beginning of this video. He is truly one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, masked or otherwise, one of the biggest names in New Japan history. So in 1997, when they were looking for his next rival, one who could be seen as a legitimate threat to the legend, well, WCW had the answer. At first glance, Chris Jericho looks like the total opposite of a stupid idiot as Super Liger, an evil version of the Japanese icon invented by Jushin himself. He was placed into the role as part of a working agreement between WCW and New Japan. But according to Jericho, the suit felt like he was wearing a body cast. He could barely see through the red mesh over the eye holes, and he could hardly breathe through the tiny mouth hole in his mask. So with that said, how do you think Y2J's Tokyo Dome debut went? Super Liger wrestled exactly one time in January of 1997 at the Dome against Koji Kanemoto. Due to the restrictions of the suit, Jericho couldn't wrestle at his normal level and even botched his trademark triangle dropkick. The match was so poorly received that the gimmick died right then and there, never to return. Jushin Liger himself tore Jericho a new one later on, as the failure of Supes could have possibly tarnished his own legacy. But things turned out okay for Jericho, who had a good run in New Japan's Sans Mask, before going back to WCW and eventually becoming one of the all-time greats himself. So Super Liger wasn't meant to be a one and done, but that's how things ended up. Whether intentional or not, one-time masked gimmicks have been a part of wrestling for a long time. But can you imagine a throwaway gimmick like that being used on a show as big as, say, WrestleMania? Well, it turns out that did happen, at the first one to be precise. Playboy Buddy Rose was the king of the Pacific Northwest during the Territory days. One of the men who'd go on to train yours truly, he had a good run in the AWA and would become a jobber in the WWF. In 1985, then Booker George Scott wanted to use Buddy on the first WrestleMania card, but didn't want Buddy himself to lose. Enter the Executioner. Not to be confused with the Terry Gordy gimmick of the same name, which, now that I think about it, also belongs in this list. The Executioner took on Tito Santana in the opening match at WrestleMania 1. The mask gimmick was a last-minute decision, and the outfit reflected that, with a black jumpsuit, a weird mask that was found at the bottom of Colonel Beers' bag, and electrical tape over the name on Buddy's boots. Buddy would lose to Santana after selling the figure 4 in the most hilarious way possible, and that was it for the Executioner. Another one-time masked wrestler? How about Greg the Hammer Valentine as the Blue Knight? At the 1993 Survivor Series, Valentine appeared under a mask as part of Jerry Lawler's team of knights against Bret Hart and his brothers. Well, that was the scheduled match, but Lawler had to go off TV for a while to deal with, legal troubles. Shawn Michaels was the King's last-minute replacement, but having a bunch of knights in HBK's corner didn't make quite as much sense. Valentine, along with other masked knights Barry Horowitz and Jeff Gaylord, would go on to lose their match against the Hart brothers. Hey, still more noble a gig than his match against George Steele at Casino Magic. From the Blue Knight to the Blue Blazer. And no, I'm not talking about the run as the Blazer that ultimately doomed Owen Hart, I'm talking about the first time he used it. Back in the late 80s, Hart debuted as the Blazer in an attempt to break out on his own without being associated with his brother Bret. It was easy to see that the Blue Blazer could wrestle circles around everyone else, but he never made it anywhere past the mid-card. Take a look at some of the future Hall of Famers that Hart beat under the mask. Steve Lombardi, Barry Horowitz, George South, Dusty Wolfe, and Gary Royal. But against anyone beyond that part of the card, the Blazer was swiftly defeated. Hart would eventually leave the company after failing to receive any kind of a push as the Blazer. It didn't help that he resembled a Sid and Marty Krofft fever dream when he came out to the ring, and let's just say his promos, well, left a lot to be desired.
But I too have my own unique style, and I use that acrobatic maneuver to beat you guys 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring.
Yeah, Owen did much better when he started playing himself. Moving on, how in the hell did Arachnaman show up on TV more than once? Poor Brad Armstrong. Objectively the best wrestler out of all of his brothers and one of the most solid workers of his generation, he was rarely ever given a chance to shine as himself. From Bad Street to Buzzkill, Armstrong was given a slew of lousy gimmicks over the years, but perhaps none were as lame as a copyright attorney's wet dream, Arachnaman. Hailing from Web City and dressed like a Korean bootleg Spider-Man who happened to be a Lakers fan, your friendly neighborhood Arachne would attack with a volley of impressive moves, emphasizing his quickness and agility. Kinda surprised he didn't use that web stuff in his entrance in his actual matches. It worked well enough for Fantasio. WCW only pulled the plug on the gimmick after they were threatened with a lawsuit by Marvel Comics, as if they didn't see that one coming. And speaking of fictional characters brought to life, here's Suicide, the hero of TNA's one and only video game, which has been covered on the show before. Debuting in 2008 as a form of cross-promotion for the game, Suicide has spent the last 8 years on and off with TNA, winning the X Division title a couple of times in the process. Had Suicide never existed in the video game world and debuted on his own, that'd be one thing, but this blatant tie-in is almost too reminiscent of Zeus fighting Hulk Hogan after No Holds Barred came out. It's just too cheesy. What's truly impressive about Suicide/Manic is the number of people who've portrayed him over the years. Christopher Daniels, Kazarian, Kiyoshi, TJ Perkins, Jonathan Gresham. I mean, at this point, more people have played Suicide than people played Doink. That's not including all the shitty copycats in the indies. Seriously, who the hell didn't play Suicide? I might have worked the gimmick once, I don't know.
What does everybody want?
Al Snow was one of my favorite characters when I started watching wrestling. This guy made crippling schizophrenia hilarious. But the Snowman has the unfortunate distinction of playing two corny masked characters in the WWF. One was Shinobi, a ninja assassin character that actually made his debut years earlier in the indies, and was even resurrected back in 2004 as part of a storyline between the coach and Tajiri. The other and better known was Avatar, who would walk to the ring without the mask on, put it on to wrestle, then take it off when he was done. I guess the mask gave him special jobbing powers and he didn't want to waste them just walking around? Avatar occasionally teamed up with another masked man named Aldo Montoya, who was known as the Portuguese Man-O-War, because I guess that was more catchy than the Portuguese guy who wears a jockstrap on his face. They gave Montoya a decent mid-card push for a time, but I can't imagine why. He could wrestle, sure, and PJ Polaco, the man behind the mask, is legitimately Portuguese. I even like how it's tied to the colors of the Portuguese flag, but whoa, that mask. If he didn't wear that ridiculous thing on his head, I think history would look much kinder on Mr. Montoya. Some wrestlers have a built-in ceiling on their drawing power, and with this gimmick, Aldo's was pretty low. I mean, once you get verbally pwned by Steve Austin for not being good enough competition, what's there left for you to do? But no worries, folks, as Montoya would move on to better things as Just Incredible. Man, going to ECW really helped a lot of people find themselves. Before we talk about the final entry in this week's episode, a little bit of background. WCW 1990. Head booker Ole Anderson and Executive Vice President Jim Herd were dead set on keeping Ric Flair away from the main event scene. Meanwhile, Sting, the champion at the time, was in desperate need of credible heel challengers. So what was Ole to do? Simple. Make one up out of thin air.
I want you to be scared. I want you to wonder. I want you to look behind you.
In August of 1990, the Black Scorpion appeared on WCW TV. His face covered by a mask and his voice distorted, the Scorpion immediately put the stinger in his crosshairs, dropping several clues about his true identity.
Oh yes, you know me. Or at least you did.
Boy, that voice sounds awfully familiar. Oh my god, the Black Scorpion was the Shockmaster's first gimmick!
Come after me, Sid.
For months, the Black Scorpion would taunt Sting and get into his head, sending out body doubles with 2 masks, controlling the minds of fans, and the most intimidating kind of head game imaginable, magic tricks. Yes, folks, in Ole Anderson's world, making a guy's head turn around in a box and turning fans into tigers is some spooky stuff. If Chris Angel were around back then, he would have made Sting shit his pants. The feud wrapped up at Starrcade when Sting put up the NWA World Championship against the Black Scorpion, who vowed to unmask if he lost. When the Scorpion was introduced, he made his way down the ramp. Then came another, then another, then another. Finally, a giant spaceship. Okay, spaceship! Okay, we have a spaceship now, great. Okay, all you die-hard WCW fans who ragged on the WWF for being too cartoony, this was the point where you officially lost the high ground. Anyway, a giant spaceship came down and popped out the real Black Scorpion. Eventually, Sting won to retain the championship and pulled off his opponent's mask, revealing him to be Ric Flair. Now at this point you might be saying this violates my rule from earlier where I said I wouldn't include wrestlers who wore a mask as a deception. Well, here's why this is an exception to that rule. Flair was never meant to be the Black Scorpion. When the gimmick first took off, everything was great, until Ole Anderson realized he needed to actually figure out who was going to be under that mask when it was time to take it off. At one point, it was going to be Al Perez, until he quit the company. Some say it was going to be Sting's old partner from Power Team USA, Dave Sheldon, but that didn't pan out for one reason or another. At one point, Ole himself planned on being the Scorpion since he was already voicing him, but a broken arm derailed those plans. In the end, Anderson and Hurd had to beg Ric Flair, the guy they already tried pushing out of the main event scene, to come back and play the Black Scorpion for Starrcade. Flair agreed to do it on the condition that he be given another championship run, which he was granted, beating Sting at a house show a few weeks later, and also being recognized as the first official WCW champion. Space Mountain may be the oldest ride in the park, but it's the one everyone comes back to when the other rides are broken. And that's been my retrospective on great wrestlers in bad masks. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little history lesson and learned a thing or two about
Hey there, Brian. May I interject for one moment?
Oh, sure, Mike. What's up?
Well, I've been listening to you, and it got me thinking. Do you think if I lost this mask, I could become a better wrestler?
Oh, Mike, you misunderstood me. See, the mask itself doesn't make a wrestler good or bad. That's not what I was trying to say. I was just trying to point out wrestlers who were objectively good but had bad masks. You, on the other hand, you're
Haha, no need to sugarcoat it with me, Brian. I already know I'm awesome, and I'm gonna be even better once I ditch this hood. I'm Adam Thornstowe now.
Oh, well, that's gonna work out pretty well for him after all.
We are the best, we are the poor. We've been kicked down and we won't take any more. We are the angry, we are the proud. Stomping through the street, fucking yelling